information in a short period of time, but and a lot of this is about where we think education innovation is going. But to have some perspective on where we're going, I think it's instructive to have some context from the past. And so, when we put this concept of a summit together, 4 years ago, in partnership with our friends at Arizona State, the idea really was around, could we get this interesting cocktail mixed together of entrepreneurs, investors, educators, policymakers, corporations, all in this mix to really focus on how could we have substantial impact to transform education. That was the thesis. And what we did then is we said we invited people that we knew from around the world to come to Scottsdale, Arizona. And what's been absolutely remarkable is the significance that we've been able to bring to this place, the energy, the ideas, the connections, the transformation. While we're a long way from home, in terms of where we want to go, we've made enormous progress. And just to give some framework around that, in terms of attendees, we started this 370 this year, 1,400 sold out. Could have taken 2,000, I'm sure. Sponsorships grown by 82%. Thank you very much. Without the sponsors, we couldn't make this happen. The support has been overwhelming. In terms of presenting companies, we have 173 companies presented at the summit. It's growing 50%. And one of the comments I made this morning at a meeting I had, when you look at the caliber, well, again, there's still a lot of very early stage companies. You look at the caliber of the entrepreneurs, the caliber of the ideas, it's absolutely blow away in terms of the progress that we're seeing, the excitement of these business models. To understand change, I want to put some framework around it because clearly change happens. You look at 200 years ago, to go from coast to coast, it took a generation and you lost half your travel party. Today, to go from New York to San Francisco takes 5 hours, and if Wi-Fi doesn't work, you're pissed off. 100 years ago, the innovation capital of the world was Detroit, Michigan. 240 automobile companies. Henry Ford was the Steve Jobs or the Mark Zuckerberg of the time. Today, Detroit, of course, is not what it used to be. In fact, what it's probably best known for is manufacturing dropouts. 75% of students coming to the schools don't make it out. Silicon Valley 100 years ago, where I live, was an apricot field. I mean, there was very little commerce other than farming, and that's what went on there. Today, obviously, many of the most important innovative companies in the world, from Google to Apple to Facebook to Twitter, Oracle, all make Silicon Valley its home. And while we think that's, what I should do, Silicon Valley, while we think it will remain as an epicenter for innovation, and it's a remarkable place in terms of the ideas that are created there, the talent that comes there, and what gets produced, what's exciting to us about change and how we see change transforming the education industry is this mindset of innovation, this entrepreneurism that makes Silicon Valley what it is, has really gone viral. It's a mindset, Silicon Valley is still a physical place, the mindset of Silicon Valley has gone across the globe. So from Austin to Boston, from Chicago to Sao Paulo, from Shanghai to Mumbai to Dubai, this innovation ecosystem is exploding. And so we call this ecosystem the Global Silicon Valley. Our firm's named GSV for Global Silicon Valley. And we think that framework provides incredible environment to see change happen at an accelerated pace. We're living in times where you see change taking place at breathtaking speeds. You got the internet now with 2.5 billion users on it globally. You have companies like Twitter, which didn't exist 5 years ago, with 550 million users. They're adding 1 million users every single day. They're bringing on 11 users every second. Facebook, with 1.1 billion users, has become the communication and collaboration platform for the world, and we think increasingly the platform that you're going to see education companies build off of. Skype, 665 million users globally, again, being a very incredible tool for distance education, tutoring, seminars, and so forth. LinkedIn, 210 million users. Its user base is growing at nearly 80% compounded going to be very important in lifelong learning. Dropbox, with over 100 million users, 1 billion files saved per day. And again, we're watching Dropbox as a tool that educators around the world are using in increasing numbers. YouTube, 1 billion users each month. Obviously, the platform that things like Khan Academy have been built from. Pinterest didn't exist 2 years ago. Today, it's been growing at 2,700%. You got 1.4 million users a day. That's more than CNN. And what's remarkable is none of these companies existed before 9/11. Just to show how significant and impactful you're seeing companies be created in relatively short periods of time, it's truly remarkable. Google, 6 billion searches a month, 2 billion education searches per month, 6 billion searches a day on Google. Growing at 63% compounded. You got 6 billion cell phones throughout the globe. 1.2 billion of those are smartphones. You're going to have mobile phone usage overtake desktop usage by the end of this year. You've got text messages. There's more text messages sent every day. It's double the population of the world. And a week's worth of New York Times contains more information than the person saw in their lifetime in the 18th century. We're truly exploding in information. And part of what's driving this is what Moore's Law, both the combination of storage, which has basically gone from very expensive and difficult, $300,000 a gigabyte, to essentially free, 4 cents for a gigabyte of storage. At the same time, the power of computing has exploded. You have more computing power in your iPhone than what NASA landed Neil Armstrong on the moon. Remarkable. So in thinking about the evolution of computing, and I think this is relevant as we apply it to the education industry, because I'm going to make an analogy very quickly. You look at where the computing industry came from. He sold very big computers. The target market was the governments, because basically that was the only people that could possibly use this. Tom Watson, the founder of IBM, said, I think they're in the world market for maybe 5 computers. In 1943, that statement was right. You know, DEC and Ken Olsen came out with the mini computer in 1964 and expanded the marketplace to many businesses that could now use computing power in their business. Then IBM introduced the personal computer in 1981, again, dramatically expanding the number of people that brought technology and automated business practices. Then the iPhone truly changed the game, basically having a computer in your pocket with multiple apps. The iPad took that one next level, and again, has had a huge impact in education. And this app economy, with $500 million devices that have been sold from Apple alone, and the app economy that's been built upon it, 40 billion downloads since it was introduced, app downloads since 2007. In 2012 alone, there was 20 billion downloads, 90,000 education apps. Remarkable. If you look at the education marketplace and the evolution of it, I'm talking primarily K-12 here. Historically, it was a top-down market, much like the computer market. You basically looked at the federal government, and you had the state government. This is how you sold your product. And then you went into the district, the school, remember him? Teacher, and now it's flipped. With this basically with ubiquitous computer and this app economy, Facebook and so forth, all of a sudden you have distribution that historically was top-down, has gone bottom-up, and that has profound impact for innovative companies. The ability to go from idea to scale has happened at a faster pace than we've ever seen in this market, and that's very exciting for this industry in terms of change. In terms of what we think is going to happen in this marketplace, from both an investable category and from an innovation standpoint, you look at education as in comparison to other major industries. It's the second largest industry. I think everybody basically knows that. 8.5% of GDP, second only to healthcare, larger than energy, larger than technology. Interesting, while the second largest industry and 8.5% of GDP, only 1.2% of venture capital investment over the past 17 years has made it into this category. Again, you compare that to healthcare. Again, healthcare, 18% or so of GDP, 20% of VC investment. Technology, roughly 8% of GDP, nearly 40% of VC investment. And from a public market standpoint, just 0.3% of the public market is education companies. Again, you look at healthcare, about 14% of public companies are healthcare companies, 30% are technology companies. We think there's a dramatic shift that's about to take place to see catch up. And the analogy that we use, it's not a perfect analogy, but I think it provides a framework, is to look at the healthcare industry versus the education market today. If you look at the healthcare industry 40 years ago, it was a large industry even then. It was 8% of GDP, a cottage industry. People asked the question not only can you make money, but should you make money delivering a human essential service. From a technology standpoint, very light, and just 2% of the capital markets. In fact, in 1970, there was only 3 healthcare companies with more than $1 billion market cap. You fast forward to today, healthcare is even a larger industry, 17% of the GDP, consolidating large global players, ubiquitous technology, and about 14% of the capital markets. In fact, there's 398 public companies with $1 billion or more market cap, all of which have been created over the past 40 years. Education today, compared to healthcare, again, large industry, 9% of GDP, cottage industry. People ask the question not only can you make money, but should you make money? Human essential service from a technology standpoint, while tremendous progress, still pretty backward compared to most other industries, and just 0.3% of the capital markets. And there's just 5 education companies today with $1 billion or more market cap. We think the catalysts are in place to see that change. We think that you're going to see continued growth in the overall size of education, but you're going to see large global players, ubiquitous technology, and we think in a relatively short period of time you're going to see catch up, which is going to create dramatic opportunity for investors and companies of scale. Venture capitalists are starting to agree with that concept. In fact, the investment in this category has grown 51% over the past 5 years, reached an all-time record of $1.2 billion last year. More importantly, the investors here are the ones that are always early and usually right. So Andreessen Horowitz is an example. Mark Andreessen, the founder of Netscape, investor in Skype, Instagram, Facebook. Today, they've made 3 investments. Udacity, Know, LearnSprout. Looking at Kleiner Perkins, John Doerr. He's the person that brought us AOL, Google, Intuit, Genentech, Amazon. Today, Kleiner Perkins invests in Chegg, Dreambox, Codecademy, Coursera. Benchmark, one of the truly premier firms, again, historically have avoided education like the plague. They're known for the investments in eBay, Twitter, Instagram, Zillow, etc. They've been investing at Modo, Minerva, Grocket, Quora, are all been benchmark investments in the past 24 months. We think this is very indicative of what's ahead of us. And part of what you're seeing for the first time with this business, this industry, has been one that's sort of get rich slower companies that kind of grew by incremental, what I call incrementalism. You're starting to see scale businesses in rapid time. So whether you're looking at iTunes with 60 million downloads, 300,000 visitors a week, Khan Academy, 240 million lessons delivered over the past 2 years, edX, 12 university partners, first course had 150,000 enrolled, Coursera, 333 courses, 62 universities, 3.2 million students in the past 24 months. Edmodo, 18.7 million users, 170,000% growth. ePals in 200 countries, 1 million classrooms. Chegg, 30% of all college students use its network. Even more remarkable, 40% of all graduate high school seniors use its network. They've shipped 2 million orange boxes in 2012, saving students $65 million. Know, digitizing textbook, and 6,000 universities are using Know. 100 publishers with 100,000 titles. Newton, 10,000 students in July of 2012, 9 months ago. End of the year, 500,000 students, contracts to have 5 million students by the end of this year, 50 million by the end of 2014. That's scaled fast. 2U, 230 million in tuition for partners. This was a concept 5 years ago. Even more remarkable, they teach 1,146 courses per week. Dreambox taught 65 million courses last year. So as we think about the future of this industry, we like to think of megatrends and how megatrends impact this gigantic sector. And I couldn't help this. We've said when an irresistible force meets an immovable object, shift happens. But these megatrends kind of across this $4.6 trillion market are creating change, and change in a rapid format. So one of the uber trends that we'd like you to think about, because we think this is an underlying current of, as we look ahead to the future, is what we call Kaizen EDU. So you know the Kaizen term for corporate, the Japanese term for continuous improvement. We apply that same framework to the society that we're in. We call it Kaizen EDU, which means basically no longer you're going to be able to fill up your knowledge tank to age 25 and drive off through life. You're going to continually need to replenish that knowledge on an ongoing basis because of the dynamic world that we're in. Knowledge is a currency. It's no longer going to be just where you go, it's what you know. It's about knowledge, not college. So software, big data, technology that allows you to know what you actually know and to apply that to opportunity is going to be the ticket to the future, as opposed to historically it was just the degree. Quick analogy that we use to think about knowledge as a currency and where we see the world going. Charles Schwab in 1990 had a concept called one source. What they basically did, and it doesn't sound very revolutionary now, but what they did then is they said you as an individual would have access to any mutual fund from any mutual fund family. We'll put it on one statement. We'll create a personalized financial portfolio. So you could have your Fidelity Equity Fund. You could have your Franklin Templeton International Fund. You could have your PIMCO Bond Fund. All that, aggregated. Again, it seems so easy today. At that point, it was revolutionary. And of course, Charles Schwab's assets exploded. Mutual fund assets exploded. You went from 1.1 trillion to 11.6 trillion of assets under management, just because this whole idea of basically being able to disaggregate different fund families to bring to your own personal financial experience. We think that same idea is going to happen in the education industry. Your own personalized knowledge portfolio, maybe a marketing class from Kellogg, a political science class from Berkeley, of course, life skills from Duke, maybe a bridge business class from Fullbridge, economics class from University of Chicago. All this into your own personalized knowledge portfolio that you bring with you to create the ticket to the future opportunity. Another important concept, and we're having the awards, called return on education. So no longer thinking about just the corporate structure, you're not-for-profit or for-profit, how ridiculous. What matters is not the corporate structure, but what kind of learner impact you're able to demonstrate. And so being able to show this in a tangible manner is increasingly how businesses, how education companies should and will be measured. So everybody's familiar with Einstein's theory of relativity. Well, this is my theory of being relevant. And what theory of being relevant is your future opportunity is going to equal your Kaizen, your continuous learning, times knowledge as a currency. And that is what's going to provide the ongoing opportunity to be relevant in the future. And we call this the law of optimized returns, because I think there's some mistake that some people think that there's some battle between creating great financial returns and what you do in a classroom. We think it's the absolute opposite. How we believe the greatest financial returns will be created is by finding companies that demonstrate the greatest ROE, the greatest educational returns. And so that's the whole concept, and we think that's an important one. So we're highlighting this ROE Awards. We hope you all come Wednesday night, where we're going to be highlighting some of the most innovative, most important education companies in the world. We think it's going to be a fabulous program. Because of time, I'm not going to, you got this all. We hope you all vote. But we have a partnership category. We've got a Kaizen EDU category. We have a learning infrastructure category, learning platform category, next generation content category, new schools, ROE accelerators, STEM, teacher support, and of course, Bill Milliken, one of our, Bill Milliken, one of our country's treasures. We were given a Lifetime Achievement for Social Impact, Marguerite Kondraki for Lifetime Achievement, and we're very, why don't you give them a round right now, because they're incredible people. But wrapping up and talking about change, and talking about how important this change is, we think we are at this inflection point as an industry, as a country, as a world. And you look at, one fundamental truth, Aristotle said inequality is the parent of revolution, and that's true. And you look at the American Revolution, And what people forget, it didn't happen overnight. I mean, in 1951, the Currency Act happened, which got people kind of riled up. Then you had the Sugar Act in 1765, the Boston Massacre in 1770, 1773, the Boston Tea Party, Lexington and Concord, 1775, then of course the Declaration of Independence, and then the Constitution of 1789. So basically 40 years passed between the first kind of agitation and revolution and change. You look at here, 40 years ago, Nation at Risk came out. And that basically said, you know, if a foreign government enacted our education system on us, we'd consider that act of war. And that was pretty startling. It was 40 years ago. And you look, and lots happened. Teach for America was started in 1989. In 1989, believe it or not, University of Phoenix created their first online program. First charter school was created in 1991. Edison, 1992. KIPP, 1994. 1995, Netscape went public, creating this incredible information distribution and transparency. Google, 1988 was created. No Child Left Behind in 2001. OpenCourseWare by MIT in 2002. 30% of all high schools dropping out. That's creating a huge easiness. 2004, Facebook was started in that bedroom. 2005, YouTube was created. 2006, Khan Academy was launched. 2007, introduction of App Store. 2009, Race for the Top. 2010, Waiting for Superman. 2010, introduction of the iPad. You know, the first MOOC by Sebastian Thune at Stanford in fall of 2011. $1 trillion of student debt, and 53% of recent college graduates unemployed. And this is the backdrop that's led us up to this point, and I think we're about to go to very exciting times because we do have, with innovation, entrepreneurs, capital, we do think we have the bayonets, and we think this idea is about to have. So with that, this is my party. I put this together for you.